The story began within the prestigious grounds of Lapis Lazuli Academy, where the protagonist, Tiara Rose, was enjoying a stroll. Her friends, Florian and Marietta, approached her with heavy hearts, lamenting that the following day marked their graduation and the end of their daily interactions. Tiara hastened to reassure them, promising that she would create opportunities for them to reunite. She reminded them that as the future queen, she would always remain within the Lapis Lazuli kingdom. The two girls acknowledged the truth of her words. Tiara was indeed betrothed to the crown and destined to rule. When the conversation turned to her wedding with Prince Heart Knights, Tiara explained that following graduation, she would undergo a rigorous year of bridal training before the ceremony took place in the cathedral. She solemnly vowed to do her utmost to meet the kingdom's expectations and maintain peace. She introduced herself not merely as Tiara, but as the daughter of the Marquis, a family granted the illustrious name Lapis by the royal family and the crown prince's official fiancé. Later, the atmosphere shifted when Tiara observed Prince Heart Knights looking unusually gloomy. Before she could approach, a strange girl suddenly appeared and embraced the prince, leaving Tiara in a state of bewilderment. It was in this moment of shock that a realization washed over her. Her current reality was actually the setting of an Otome game she had played in her previous life. She realized she had died and reincarnated into the game world, not as the heroine, but as the villainess, Tiara Rose. The scene shifted to Tiara's chambers, where Prince Heart sat beside her. He suggested she rest while he prepared a carriage for her departure. Tiara looked at him, recalling that Prince Heart was the primary capture target of the game and the first prince of the kingdom. Heart broke the silence by asking why she had fainted, cynically suggesting that she might have been trying to garner his attention simply because he had been focusing on the strange girl, Akari. Tiara was taken aback by his accusation, noting that the prince's gaze was dry, cold, and completely unlike the warm character she remembered from the game. She defended herself, explaining that she had fainted due to genuine illness, and apologized for the trouble. However, Heart dismissed her apology with indifference. He stated that although he was practically her fiancé, he had other work to attend to and therefore would not be escorting her to the graduation ceremony the following day. After the prince left, Tiara was left furious that he would refuse to escort his own fiancé to such a significant event. She forced herself to calm down by relying on her meta-knowledge of the story. She recalled the game's main route. The protagonist, a girl possessing powerful magic, would enroll in the academy and captivate Crown Prince Heart, the most popular student. He was scripted to shower the heroine with kindness and romantic affirmations, leading to a grand wedding in the cathedral. Tiara realized with dread that she was not that protagonist. She was the villainess who, in the original narrative, had treated the heroine cruelly out of jealousy. This behavior was supposed to lead to the condemnation event at the graduation party, resulting in the annulment of her engagement. As she rode in the carriage toward her home, Tiara resolved that she would not commit those villainous acts. Since today was the day before the game's finale, she hoped that by changing her behavior, she could avoid the tragic ending. Upon arriving at the mansion, she was greeted by her maid, Felin. Tiara reflected on her family history, noting that the name Lapis was an honor granted only to families who performed great charitable deeds for the crown. Inside, her parents greeted her with a warmth that surprised her, as they were usually quite distant. They had prepared a beautiful dress for her wedding, and her father, the prime minister, had personally procured some of her favorite sweets to present to her. Touched by this gesture, Tiara reflected on the life she had led in this world. She had undergone grueling training since childhood to become a queen worthy of Prince Heart. Her father had taught her statecraft and etiquette, and she had absorbed it all out of love for the prince. Yet, it seemed her feelings had never reached him. It was a strictly unrequited love. For a moment, she considered not attending the graduation party at all to avoid the inevitable humiliation, but she stopped herself. She realized she could not bring trouble or shame upon her kind parents. She resigned herself to the fact that Prince Heart's changed feelings aligned with the game's forced narrative, and she accepted that she likely could not escape her role as the villainess. Elsewhere, Prince Heart was seen whispering a private apology to the absent Tiara, asking for forgiveness for what was to come. The day of the condemnation event, the graduation party arrived. Tiara, Marietta, and Florian gathered to discuss Akari, who had been behaving with excessive familiarity toward Prince Heart Knights. The friends were outraged that Akari dared to cling to him while knowing his fiancé was present. Marietta and Florian swore their loyalty to Tiara, promising to stand by her side no matter what. After the girls departed, Tiara admitted to herself that despite her mental preparation for the condemnation, she was still deeply afraid. Feline, sensing her mistress's anxiety, urged Tiara to contact Lord Heart and demand an escort, warning that Tiara's father would be furious if he saw her enter the party alone. To lift Tiara's spirits, Feline brought out a large selection of sweets. Tiara was delighted, She had loved bread and sweets in her previous life, and eating them brought her genuine happiness. She asked Feline to always bring her such treats to cheer her up, and Feline happily agreed. The moment was interrupted when Akari barged into the room to check on Tiara. Feline attempted to stop her, stating that she could not enter without a prior announcement, but Akari ignored the maid and approached Tiara regardless. Tiara recognized Akari instantly as the Otome game's heroine. Dressed in a luxurious, cute gown and dripping with glittering jewels, Akari embodied the perfect protagonist. She claimed she was worried after Tiara's collapse the previous day and mentioned that Prince Heart was also concerned. Right on cue, Prince Heart entered the room to confirm whether Tiara would be attending the ceremony. He remarked that since she had rested, there should be no issue. Tiara confirmed she would attend and asked Feline to hasten the preparations. Realizing they were interrupting, Akari and the prince excused themselves. The following day, Tiara entered the graduation hall. Everything was exactly as depicted in the game. When she walked through the doors alone, the crowd was astonished, whispering about why the future queen was unescorted and questioning the identity of the girl standing next to the prince. Without missing a beat, Prince Heart announced the annulment of his engagement to Tiara Rose. Though shocked, Tiara gathered her strength. She demanded to know his reasoning, asserting that she had done nothing to deserve such treatment. She pointed out that if he wished to take another consort, there were proper legal procedures he was required to follow. The prince grew angry at her retort, accusing her of being cruel to Akari, specifically citing Akari's ignorance of high society due to her countryside upbringing. Tiara interrupted him to correct the record. She admitted that she had instructed Akari, but only on necessary etiquette, such as kneeling when greeting the crown prince and refraining from dancing with him more than twice, privileges reserved solely for his fiancée. She insisted these were logical laws of the kingdom that the prince should be well aware of. Heart yelled back that Akari had personally told him Tiara was cruel. At this, Tiara realized that defending herself was futile. Whether the heroine had manipulated him or the game's script was forcing the event, the ending seemed immutable. When Heart asked her if she consented to the annulment, she simply answered in the affirmative. Heart then publicly proposed to Akari, declaring she would be the future queen. Tiara thought that perhaps this was the end of it, taking comfort in the fact that she still had her parents and Feline. However, the prince then delivered the final blow. He announced Tiara Rose's banishment from the kingdom. The weight of the sentence crushed her. Banishment meant she would never be allowed to see her beloved parents or Feline ever again. Just as hope seemed lost, a new voice cut through the tension. Prince Akuyaku arrived and gently asked Tiara if she was all right. Tiara was stunned by the sudden appearance of the first prince of the neighboring marine forest kingdom. She recognized him immediately as the main character of the game's sequel, a character she had loved since seeing his design, even before his game was released. Prince Akuyaku instructed her to stand proudly and with more dignity than anyone else present. When Heart tried to intervene, insisting that Tiara must be condemned for her actions, Akuyaku rebuked him sharply. He told Heart that his own words were far harsher than anything Tiara had said. He criticized Heart for annulling an engagement at a celebratory event and for insulting a lone woman in front of the entire court, behaviors he deemed unworthy of a crown prince. Then, to the shock of every attendee, Prince Akuyaku declared that he had desperately wanted Tiara Rose to be his queen for a long time. Tiara was astonished that a character from the sequel would propose to her. Akuyaku, realizing the suddenness of his proposal, offered her time to consider it. Akari, however, could not stay silent. She protested, claiming such a union was impossible because Tiara was cruel and aggressive, and she brazenly invited Akuyaku to join her and Heart instead. Tiara immediately scolded Akari, warning her that she must not touch the crown prince of a neighboring kingdom so casually. Prince Akuyaku thanked Tiara for her concern. He then turned a cold gaze toward Akari, reminding her that she knew his status as the first prince of Marine Forest, yet chose to treat him with disrespect. He ordered the guards to take Akari away. Turning back to Tiara, he apologized for causing a commotion by barging in and promised to help her at any time. As the events unfolded, Tiara realized with immense relief that by the intervention of the sequel's prince, they had successfully bypassed the game's bad ending. Tiara apologized for staring at him so intently, acknowledging that his looks were a favorite among the ladies. Hearing this, Prince Akuyaku wondered if that meant he could get his hopes up a bit. When she asked why he had proposed to her, he answered that there was only one reason. He had desperately wanted her. Tiara had first met Prince Akuyaku a year prior at a soiree. Although they were in the same class at the academy, they hadn't really spoken at all, leading her to wonder why he chose her. He revealed that he had always watched her from the window of the library. He often saw her reading in the shade of a tree, and thought the constant changes in her expression were adorable. She looked so serious when reading, but in the next moment, she would start shyly blushing. When he saw tears in her eyes, he wanted to embrace her badly. Flustered, she covered her face with her hands and asked him to forget that, but he admitted he couldn't. Now that they were finally together, he wanted to see more of her face. Watching her reading under that tree every day, he had become captivated by her so much so that he even surprised himself. However, because she was engaged to Heart Knights, Aquastide knew he could never steal a foreign prince's fiancée, so he originally intended to keep his feelings to himself. After completing his year of studying abroad, he returned home and told himself to forget about her. But then, he couldn't believe his luck and became desperate not to let the opportunity pass him by. He admitted that he thought he was pathetic, but Tiara assured him that wasn't the case at all. When she was standing there all alone, his presence had been very reassuring. He admitted he was a bit shocked when Prince Heart Knights went so far as to banish her, though the thought had crossed his mind to simply take her away as she were banished. As he inhaled the scent of her hair, she asked him not to tease her, but he insisted he was serious. She wondered how he could say all this so calmly, questioning if it was because he was a character in an Otome game or if it was just his personality. It pained him to hear that she doubted him. He loved her so much that he just couldn't contain himself. He lightly kissed her forehead, and unfortunately, they arrived at their destination. As he escorted her out, she thanked him for seeing her home. He asked her out on a date, and she gladly accepted. Graduating from the academy meant she finally had plenty of time. Inside the house, Tiara's father was furious. Her engagement was annulled, and the prince had threatened to banish her from the kingdom. He asked how that fool dared to say such things to his sweet Tiara Rose. Tiara's mother, however, brought up how lovely Prince Aquastide was and asked if Tiara was going to answer him. They all wanted to know how she felt. Tiara thought he was far more than she deserved, wondering if a future where Villainess married the crown prince of a neighboring country was even possible. The next day, Heart Knights demanded the guards let him through to see Akari. Despite his father's orders, Heart Knights promised he wouldn't be long, explaining that he realized his judgment might have been a mistake and needed to speak to her to know for sure. Akari was happy to see him, complaining that she missed him and was dying of boredom and confinement. Hearing the word boredom, he was surprised, as it seemed what happened at the graduation party wasn't on her mind at all. He asked if what Tiara had said that day that Akari hadn't done anything wrong was true. Akari claimed she suddenly remembered, feeling bad because Tiara was mean to her, but since she had him by her side, she felt very reassured. Heart Knight shrugged her off, making her question if Tiara had said something to him. She couldn't believe the Villainess was still involved even after the story was over. She told Heart Knights to get her out of there as soon as he could and to also tell her about Prince Aquastide. She claimed that after what Tiara told her, she wanted to save Aquastide before he got hurt, too. The end of the graduation event marked the end of all the game's events. Tiara contemplated what might happen next. Prince Aquastide was the main character in the sequel, and she couldn't imagine a future where she, the Villainess, became his consort. She feared that if the sequel had a heroine, Aquastide might have a change of heart too, just like Heart Knights. Suddenly, a rock hit her window. Going to check on it, she saw Aquastide waiting outside. He greeted her smoothly, remarking on how beautiful the moon was that night. He asked if she was familiar with the Fairy Star Festival, an event in one episode of The Ring of Lapis Lazuli that the heroine usually gets to see with the character she is closest to. Aquastide used his magic to call the fairies. He then put his jacket on Tiara so she wouldn't catch a cold and rested his head on her shoulder, expressing how happy he was to spend time with her. Looking at the sky, she was awed by the beautiful star shower. He was glad she enjoyed it. Staring at his eyes, she compared their golden glow to the stars, feeling as if they were sucking her in. Later, while having a meal together, the king asked Heart Knights if he had gained anything from meeting with Akari. Heart Knights apologized for going off on his own but reported that he realized he had believed what Akari was saying without even questioning it. He wished he had listened to Tiara more. The king said he had apologized to Tiara for the terrible time she had, but she didn't blame Heart Knights at all. The two of them used to talk all the time, and Heart Knights regrettably remembered that she had kept him in line whenever he was skipping class, helped him work through his nervousness, and told him to carry himself with confidence. She had constantly scolded him because her focus had always been on the future of the kingdom. Heart Knights only now realized she had cared for him so much. Meanwhile, Tiara had moved on and was getting ready to look glamorous for Aquastide. Philin chuckled, thinking Tiara looked like she was having so much fun. It made sense since this was her first date. She had never gone on a single date with Heart Knights. Philin adorned Tiara with a hair ornament made of coral, a specialty of the Marin Forest Kingdom, sure that Aquastide would be pleased when he saw her wearing it. When Aquastide arrived, Tiara's heart was pounding in her chest, and her feet felt like they were floating. She had never felt like this before. She enjoyed the beautiful field of flowers he took her to, which was another experience she had never had before. Sitting down for a picnic under the shade of a tree, she presented some madeleines and cookies she had baked for him. He enjoyed the delicious taste, and she went on about how she loved eating and baking sweets. She explained that madeleines were one of her favorites because they were light and airy but perfectly moist, pairing well with tea, cocoa, and so many other drinks. She admitted she once baked a whole basket full, then got absorbed in a book, and before she knew it, the basket was empty. Aquasteed loved how adorable she was when talking about sweets and said he could listen to her forever. He picked up a cookie and told her to open wide. She wasn't expecting that, but she ate it from his hands, finding that this somehow made it taste better. He suddenly held her close and whispered a request to call her Tiara. She noted that he had been calling her Lady Tiara Rose the entire time. She told him it was fine, and he in turn wanted her to call him Aqua. She realized she had never felt anything when Heart Knights called her Tiara. Aqua suddenly embraced her. He didn't know what to do. He was so happy. She worried that being this close, he would notice her heart was racing. Her eyes widened when she noticed his heart was beating just as fast. He caressed her hair, telling her she looked like she was waiting to be kissed right now. He felt it was too bad. He had planned to go on more dates and take his time, but it was no use. In front of him, he couldn't help but want her. He then asked for a favor, for her to feed him a cookie. She did, and while he chewed, she felt like she was feeding an animal. She was glad he enjoyed her cookies so much. Turning around, he noticed the coral hair ornament and asked if it meant he could get his hopes up. Resting his head on her shoulder, Tiara again wondered what would happen to her from here on out. Back at home, she wanted to talk to her father about something. When he guessed it was about Prince Aquasteed, she quickly flushed. He admitted he would be sad seeing his daughter marry into another kingdom, but seeing her happy and smiling was what mattered most to him. The next day, Elliot, Prince Aquasteed's attendant, greeted her. The two conversed on the differences between the two kingdoms. Marine forest was apparently abundant in natural coral, pearls, and other jewels of the sea, which she thought was every girl's dream. They came across Heart Knights along the way, who froze upon seeing her. He apologized for what happened at the graduation party, which was not what she was expecting. She told him to raise his head because a member of royalty shouldn't bow to just anyone. He felt nostalgic, remembering she always cautioned him about all kinds of things. He thanked her for doing so much for him. She was glad he understood and felt genuinely happy to see the character she loved in her past back on his feet. He went to reach for her, but Aquasteed slapped his hand away. Holding Tiara tight in his arms, Aquasteed asked Heart Knights what he was trying to do to his beloved fiancée. The story goes back 1 year in time to when Prince Aquasteed arrived at the Lapis Lazuli Academy to complete his studies after traveling extensively to broaden his knowledge. While the other young ladies whispered about his mastery of the sword, to which he would offer a charming smile, Elliot noticed that the prince attracted attention wherever he went, inadvertently forming a fan club. Aquasteed was aware that this adoration stemmed solely from his status as a foreign prince. However, he remained indifferent to the attention, caring only about his academic pursuits. Elliot advised Aquasteed that he should broaden his horizons, noting that while the prince had received numerous social invitations, he had not rejected all of them. When Elliot suggested accepting at least one, Aquasteed refused, explaining that he had many books he yearned to read, specifically those unavailable in Marine Forest, and that he was determined to prove himself worthy of being his kingdom's crown prince. Aquasteed's singular focus remained unshaken until one day in the library, when he spotted Tiara Rose. The moment he saw her smile, his heart trembled. He recalled meeting her previously at his welcome party, where Prince Heart Knights had introduced her as his fiancée. Even then, Aquasteed had observed her perfect etiquette and refined behavior, realizing she had worked tirelessly to master them. Tiara Rose maintained absolute decorum and always offered help to those in need. While Aquasteed merely attempted to appear as a worthy prince, Tiara Rose naturally emanated the dignity of a Lapis noble. He felt a kinship with her, as they both maintained a constant, rigorous discipline. However, Aquasteed found it fascinating that Tiara Rose's expression would shift completely whenever she ate sweets, a stark contrast to her usual composed self. The more he observed her, the more his curiosity grew. He found himself wondering what she was reading or saying, while a strange sensation bloomed in his chest. Elliot eventually realized that Aquasteed was no longer visiting the library to read, but to watch the flowers, a metaphor for Tiara Rose. For Aquasteed, simply seeing her brought him tranquility. One day, sudden rain threatened to ruin the book Tiara Rose was reading in the garden. Breaking his custom of rarely using magic, Aquasteed commanded the winds to disperse the clouds, allowing the sun to shine again solely to protect her book. When Elliot questioned why he had used his magic, Aquasteed admitted it was for Tiara Rose. He realized with certainty that he had fallen in love, and despite his attempts to deny it, he simply wanted to bring her a small moment of joy. As time passed, Aquasteed longed to speak to Tierra Rose but felt he could not. She was so close, yet forbidden territory as Prince Heart Knight's fiancée. Elliot encouraged him to approach her, but Aquasteed refused to interfere, convincing himself that first love was ephemeral and rarely fruitful. He resolved to let her go and simply wish for her happiness. This resolve was tested the day Tierra Rose fainted from the shock of seeing her fiancé with Akari. Aquasteed carried her to the infirmary, wondering what could cause someone as resilient as Tierra Rose to collapse. He recalled rumors about Akari, the black-haired girl who had aggressively pursued Heart Knights. Aquasteed decided then that if Heart Knights were foolish enough to abandon Tierra Rose for Akari, he would not hesitate to claim her. When Heart Knights arrived to apologize for the trouble, Aquasteed assured him it was no burden. Leaving the infirmary, Aquasteed reflected that carrying her was the first time he had touched his beloved. He reminded himself that his time at the academy would end the following day with the graduation party, and he was determined to leave these feelings behind. However, the next day, when Heart Knights publicly scorned Tierra Rose and annulled their engagement, a storm of emotions surged within Aquasteed. He decided instantly to stop hesitating and follow his heart. After paying his respects to King Alexander, he appeared before Tierra Rose and took her into his arms, finally close to the flower he had only watched from afar. Days later, with Elliot's assistance, Aquasteed sent a magical letter in the form of a dove to his father, stating his intention to return to Marine Forest with Tierra Rose as his fiancée. He was determined to ensure his beloved would live in his kingdom without want. Elliot, seeing how quickly and smoothly events had unfolded, felt foolish for his previous worries, though Aquasteed was equally surprised by the turn of events. A desire soon grew in Aquasteed to make Tierra Rose his alone, a wish fulfilled when she agreed to marry him. When Tierra Rose visited him days later, Aquasteed was eager to see her, but Elliot insisted he finish his accumulated paperwork first. Upon finishing, Aquasteed found Tierra Rose talking to her ex-fiancé. Irritated, Aquasteed intervened just as Heart Knights reached out to touch her. He defended her, demanding to know what Heart Knights planned to do with his fiancée. He kissed Tierra Rose's hair, apologizing for his delay, and informed the stunned Heart Knights that their engagement was official, sanctioned by both King Alexander, Marquise Clemental, and Aquasteed's own parents. Aquasteed territorially warned Heart Knights that he could no longer touch Tierra Rose. Heart Knights apologized immediately, and Aquasteed decided to overlook the transgression as a first offense. He then expressed his joy at Tierra Rose's visit, and the couple departed, leaving the blonde prince to regret the jewel he had let slip away. Afterward, Tierra Rose attempted to discuss the confrontation, but Aquasteed silenced her, stating that as her fiancé, protecting her was natural. Tierra Rose blushed deeply. Hearing him verify their status aloud made her heart race. Aquasteed thanked her for choosing him, and she reciprocated, feeling profoundly safe by his side. Aquasteed took Tierra Rose to the garden for tea and cake. He asked if she enjoyed the dessert, and she enthusiastically explained her love for strawberries, how they were sweet, acidic, and beautiful, and how she loved baking with them. She suddenly apologized for getting carried away, explaining that regaining her old memories had reignited her passion for creating strawberry desserts. Aquasteed was delighted that she was happy and revealed that the strawberries were actually from his homeland, as they were a specialty of Marine Forest. Once they finished eating, Elliot formally introduced himself to Tierra Rose, explaining that while he lacked a noble surname, he had long served Prince Aquasteed. Philine, Tierra Rose's maid, was charmed and introduced herself in return, explaining that she had served Tierra Rose since childhood and had been her personal servant for a year. Tierra Rose affectionately noted that Philine was like an older sister who always supported her. Philine vowed to stay by Tierra Rose's side and accompany her to Marine Forest, a sentiment that impressed Aquasteed, who noted she was an excellent maid. Meanwhile, Akari was bored because Prince Heart Knights had stopped visiting her. Jealous that Tierra Rose was receiving all the attention, Akari questioned why she, the game's protagonist, wasn't the focus. She decided she wanted Prince Aquasteed for herself and hatched a plan. Back in the garden, Aquasteed led Tierra Rose to a private spot. He confessed that while he was grateful she accepted his public proposal, he worried she felt forced. He proposed again, privately and sincerely asking her to be his consort. Tierra Rose accepted without hesitation, saying it would be a pleasure to be his wife. Overjoyed, Aquasteed embraced her and confessed his love. He kissed her, which Tierra Rose felt was the kiss of her dreams. Unable to contain his affection, Aquasteed planted small kisses all over her face, apologizing that her adorableness made him lose control. Tierra Rose was embarrassed but incredibly happy. Suddenly, a bright magical light interrupted their moment. Tara Rose recognized it as the Holy Prayer, a purification magic that protects the kingdom and brings peace, a power possessed only by the game's protagonist. She had forgotten about it because Akari had never used it before, and she was confused as to why Akari was using it now. The light faded, and Elliot went with guards to investigate. Philene told Tara Rose not to worry, but Tara Rose was terrified. She knew that every nation, including Marine Forest, craved the power of the Holy Prayer. She began to doubt, fearing that Aquasteed might want that power and abandon her for the protagonist. Sensing her fear, Aquasteed immediately promised Tara Rose that no matter what happened, he would protect her. On another day, Philene served Tiara extra sweet tea to soothe her nerves. Tiara drank anxiously, worried by the lack of news regarding the Holy Prayer inspection. She felt a knot in her stomach at the thought of what might happen once Aqua discovered Akari's power. Although Aqua was originally a character introduced in the game's sequel, the timeline seemed to be shifting. Tiara wondered if the story was advancing to the sequel immediately, and if Aqua would ultimately end up by Akari's side. Eventually, a knight reported that the mysterious light was merely the result of defective magical equipment. Consequently, Lady Tara Rose was instructed to return home until the inspection of said equipment was complete. While others were relieved it was nothing serious, Tiara knew the truth about the Holy Prayer. She felt reluctant to leave, desperate to see for herself how the game's events would unfold, hoping fervently that Aqua would not choose the heroine. That evening, Noah informed Aqua that Akari had indeed mastered the Holy Prayer. Aqua was stunned by the news. This development was problematic, as the Holy Prayer was a coveted power capable of granting total peace, making Akari a target for every royal family. It was highly probable that the kingdom of Lapis Lazuli would force Akari to marry Prince Heartknights to secure the power so they would never lose her. Despite this, Aqua considered using Marin Forest's influence to intervene, desiring the power to ensure his own nation's prosperity. 10 days passed and Tiara still knew nothing about the Holy Prayer. She assumed her father, the Prime Minister, might know the truth, but she could not question him about state secrets that the royal family was keeping quiet. She also had not seen Aqua since the incident. Philene alerted Tiara that preparations for her departure to Marin Forest were complete and they could leave whenever she was ready. Tiara felt trapped between a rock and a hard place, frustrated that all she could do was wait for word from him. Meanwhile, Akari continued to mull over why Prince Aqua had not visited her yet. She had convinced herself that once he saw the Holy Prayer, he would immediately claim her and take her to his kingdom. She was delighted by the idea of marrying him and going to Marin Forest. However, 2 weeks had already passed. Akari whined and complained about wanting Prince Aqua until she finally heard a knock at her door and lit up with a bright smile. Sometime later, Tiara was preparing desserts. She believed that today was the day Aqua would finally come to see her. Assuming the details of the situation had been decided, she tried to remain optimistic because her father hadn't shared any negative news. When Aqua arrived, he apologized for his recent absence, explaining that preparations had taken all his time. Tiara told him not to worry, though she noticed he seemed despondent. As they sat down for tea, Aqua revealed the truth. The engagement regarding the wielder of the Holy Prayer had been settled. Tiara's heart sank. She feared that Aqua had secured Akari for himself to obtain the power, and she silently prayed that her love would not be taken from her. Aqua then clarified that Lady Akari and Prince Heartknights were now formally engaged. Tiara opened her eyes in surprise. Aqua had imagined she would feel conflicted since Heartknights was the man who had previously hurt her, but Tiara was overwhelmingly thankful that Aqua had not chosen Akari. When she admitted her fear that he was getting engaged to Akari, he asked why she would think that, insisting he would never choose anyone but her. Holding her hands, he apologized for making her uneasy and wiped away her tears. He kissed her sobbing face, looked her in the eye, and confessed how much he missed her. The two kissed with loving passion. Tiara was relieved that he hadn't chosen Akari. Aqua then told her he was taking her with him to Marin Forest and asked if she would stay by his side for the rest of their lives. She accepted, and they kissed again. That night, Tiara was awakened by a bright light in her room. Akari greeted her and asked if Tiara was a player in this game as well. Tiara gasped, realizing that Akari had transmigrated just like her. Akari continued, noting that Tiara was the only deviation from the original game script. Everything else had gone according to events, yet the ending had not gone right for Akari at all. Tiara tried to feign ignorance, but Akari told her to stop playing dumb. Akari explained that she had planned to marry Prince Heartknights and be happy, but then her favorite character, Prince Aqua, had appeared. She revealed that Aqua was the main route in the sequel. While she would have been content with Heartknights, her second favorite, she preferred Aqua. Akari realized Tiara knew nothing about the sequel or its heroine, a duke's daughter in Marine Forest named Isilla. Akari explained that in the sequel, Aqua meets Isilla on the seashore, just when he is fed up with the fiancé the state chose for him. Akari made it evident she could use the holy prayer and believed that if she told Aqua, she would be able to marry him. She demanded that Tiara break up with him. When Tiara refused, arguing that Aqua was a person and not just a game character, Akari grew hostile. She claimed Aqua would obviously choose her once he knew the truth. Akari raised her hand and cast a vicious thunder spell that cut Tiara's cheek. She threatened to knock Tiara unconscious to sabotage the engagement, arguing that as the heroine, she was destined for the happy ending. Just as Akari fired another spell, a blue barrier of light materialized around Tiara. Aqua appeared from behind, holding Tiara and apologizing for not arriving sooner. He inspected the cut on her cheek while Akari stared in disbelief. Marquis Clementale entered the room, demanding to know what was happening. Akari attempted to twist the narrative, claiming she was being forced to marry Heart Knights and begging Aqua to save her for the sake of his kingdom's prosperity. The Marquis scolded her entitlement, but Akari insisted her power was necessary. Aqua firmly rejected her, stating that while he knew she possessed the holy prayer, he did not need her to lead his kingdom to prosperity. He declared that Tiara was the only one he wanted. Akari collapsed to the floor, screaming that it was all lies and inconceivable that he wouldn't choose her. Aqua ordered her apprehension, and knights restrained her with magic binding cuffs. Aqua comforted Tiara, telling her she was safe now that he was there. The next morning, Akari complained about her confinement in the tower. Though Tiara's intervention had spared her from harsher punishment, her magic was restricted to simple tasks like watering plants. Prince Heart Knights visited her, stating plainly that they would proceed with their marriage. To his surprise, Akari accepted casually. She explained that she loved him too, admitting that she simply loved everything about this Otome game world and was happy to be with any of the love interests. Relieved by her acceptance, Heart Knights departed. Tiara and Aqua bid farewell to her parents. Aqua promised to make Tiara happy, and the parents chuckled at the couple's affection, though they were sad to see their daughter go. Tiara promised to return for her debutante party after a year of bridal training. As the carriage departed, Tiara overcame her embarrassment and rested her head on Aqua's shoulder. He reciprocated, calling her cute. Suddenly, a magical letter from Akari appeared. It read that she would do her best to be happy with Prince Heart Knights and wished Tiara happiness as well. However, Tiara noticed a postscript in Japanese at the bottom. "If you lose to the sequel's heroine, I'll never forgive you." Tiara chuckled, vowing not to lose to a rival she hadn't even met yet. As their carriage entered Marine Forest territory, two men observing from the sky wondered what kind of girl Aqua had brought home. The kingdom of Marine Forest was a unique land, home to a human king who ruled alongside 3 fairy kings. The Forest Fairy King blessed the land with fertility and abundance, the Sky Fairy King ensured clean air and life-giving rain, and the Sea Fairy King provided a wealth of coral, pearls, and fish. Every member of the Marine Forest royal family was beloved by these fairies, whose power was vital to the kingdom's prosperity. Tiara was set to undergo bridal training for the next year. Although she felt a tinge of sadness about leaving her homeland, the presence of Aquasteed brought her happiness. He had assured her that she could always confide in him if she felt troubled, though he privately admitted to himself that if she ever asked to go home, he lacked the confidence to let her go. Upon reaching the border, the landscape shifted from the roses of lapis lazuli to the distinct scenery of marine forest. The sky rippled with bubbles and waves, resembling an ocean above, while a beautiful coastline stretched out before them. It was Tiara's first time seeing the sea. 3 small fairies emerged from the water to welcome Aquasteed and Elliot home. Eager to make friends, Tiara attempted to greet them, but they rejected her with hostility, declaring that they hated her. Aquasteed explained that fairies were fickle creatures. Despite their dislike of Tiara, they clamored joyfully around Philine. Suddenly, a blue-haired woman named Isilla Perlant emerged from the water. Tiara recognized the name immediately. Akari had previously mentioned that Isilla was the sequel's heroine and the daughter of a duke. Isilla had been swimming with the sea fairies and greeted Aquasteed familiarly. Aquasteed explained that the Perlant ducal family oversaw the oceans, and Isilla often assisted him with his work due to her skill in raising marine life. Watching the two interact with such familiarity, Tiara worried that she might still be the villainess in this sequel's timeline, fearing her existence was irregular and disconnected from the story. Feeling dispirited, Tiara retreated to a tree to rest and sulk over the heroine's early arrival. She dreaded the thought of losing Prince Aquasteed but felt unable to feign cheerfulness. Sensing her distress, 4 forest fairies appeared. One coughed, shooting a small magic puffball, and they instantly expressed their adoration for her. Elliot was astounded, noting that forest fairies rarely like humans, yet here they were blessing her. When Tiara explained she just wanted to stretch her legs, the fairies, sensing her sadness, offered her a flower. They enthusiastically shoved it into her mouth, and to her surprise, it was delicious. When she returned to Aquastide, he implored her not to worry him and to take him with her next time. Tiara felt fortunate. Instead of fearing the heroine, she realized she should treasure the wonderful people who supported her. At Marine Forest Castle, Tiara learned that a welcome party would be held in her honor in 3 days. Aquastide was arranging a dress for her, though he found it difficult to contain his affection, groaning that he had to wait a whole year to marry her when he wanted to make her his wife immediately. Tiara chided him gently, promising to complete her bridal training to become a helpful wife. They shared a kiss, reassured that everything would be fine. On the day of the party, Feline styled Tiara's hair in a popular half-up style but realized they lacked a hair accessory. Maids arrived with special flowers from the castle courtyard, but Tiara wished for a deep blue one to match Aquastide's hair. Although that color did not grow during that season, the flowers suddenly shifted to the exact shade she desired, a gift from the forest fairies. The maids were awestruck, explaining that while some people received blessings from the sea or sky fairies, they had never heard of anyone receiving a blessing from the forest fairies. During the party, the guests, along with the king and queen, watched as the betrothed couple danced with fairy tale grace. Aquastide took the opportunity to compliment Tiara, noting how the blue roses in her hair matched his own, creating the illusion that she belonged entirely to him. Tiara greeted King Sotiris and Queen Lavina Marin Forest, promising to devote herself to her studies to support Aquastide. Isilla approached to congratulate the couple, expressing a desire to become great friends with Tiara and inviting her to visit the Pearlant Mansion. Tiara reciprocated the pleasantries, though internally she wished to avoid the heroine. On the day of her visit to Isilla's estate, Tiara sulked, causing her personal knight, Tarmo, to worry, though she assured him she was fine. Isilla welcomed Tiara and showed her the garden, where a fountain filled with seawater housed rare fish species. Isilla then offered to take Tiara into the ocean. Using the blessing of the sea fairies, she cast a spell that allowed breathing underwater and created a layer of air around Tiara to keep her dry. Tiara was impressed by the sequel's heroine, wondering if she stood a chance against someone so loved by the fairies. Over tea, Isilla remarked that it was wonderful that Tiara was marrying Aquastide out of love. Tiara was confused, asking if that meant Isilla did not love him. She complimented Isilla's beauty, assuming she was surrounded by suitors. Isilla, however, explained that she entrusted her engagement to her father and was happy as long as she could be in the sea. She admitted she had yet to fall in love with anyone. Tiara sensed Isilla was pure and honest, realizing the girl was not lying. Standing by the shoreline, Isilla called for the sea fairy's blessing, and a bubble surrounded them, allowing them to dive into the blue depths. Tiara was amazed that the fish were unafraid of humans, making Isilla appear like a sea goddess. Glad that Tiara was enjoying herself, Isilla announced she would head back up first to prepare warm tea, leaving Tiara to enjoy the underwater scenery a bit longer. Shortly after, Tiara rose from the water and spotted Isilla chatting with Aquastide. Witnessing Aquastide touch Isilla's face, Tiara sank back down in shock, wondering if the game's force was pulling them together. Determining not to run, she burst from the water to convey her feelings. When Aquastide explained he was there to pick her up, she clung to him possessively, telling him not to leave her alone. Later, while touring the castle with Tarmo, Tiara spotted Aquastide and Isilla talking again. Tarmo assumed they were discussing work, but Tiara noted that Aquastide had said he would be in his office, yet they were on the terrace. Feeling unsettled, she went to the garden, where the forest fairies greeted her joyfully. As she fed them cookies, a green-haired fairy beckoned her toward a portal, indicating their king was ahead. Tiara stepped through, and the path closed behind her. She was teleported to a solemn room, where she was taken aback to find herself standing before the king of the forest fairies. Tiara met the forest fairy king, who requested she simply call him Keith. Tilting her head up, Keith observed that her soul was highly unusual, unstable, yet remarkably beautiful, and noted that it carried a pleasantly sweet scent. Assuming he was reacting to her freshly baked treats, Tiara offered him a cookie. Keith found it exceptionally good, realizing it was laced with her own magic. He explained that his aversion to royal titles stemmed from the fact that fairies lived entirely free. Harboring a quiet wish for such freedom from her recent human burdens, Tiara admired his outlook. Offering comfort, Keith gently patted her head and promised to be her strength should anything happen, leaving her deeply thankful. Elsewhere, Prince Aqua met with Isilla, expressing his warm gratitude for her help in designing a hair ornament for his fiancée. Isilla felt a sharp pang of envy at Aqua's genuine devotion to Tiara. Their peaceful meeting shattered when Tarmo suddenly burst in to report Tiara's disappearance. Meanwhile, Keith learned that Tiara was Aqua's fiancée and the future queen. When he mused aloud about how complicated humans could be, Tiara passionately defended Aqua's profound kindness and the unwavering support of his people. Realizing she had been gone too long, she noted she had to return. Keith pulled her close and seamlessly teleported her back to her room, leaving her awestruck by his effortless mastery of complex magic. Entering at that exact moment, Aqua drew his blade, demanding the stranger step away. Unwavering, Keith boldly declared he would be a better match for her. Tiara swiftly intervened before things escalated. Realizing Keith's true identity, Aqua lowered his weapon and kneeled to apologize. However, he quickly rose, twirled Tiara to his side, and pointedly scolded the Fairy King for getting so uncomfortably close to his fiancée. Keith dismissed the tension, kissed Tiara's hand, eliciting a gasp, and extended an open invitation for her to call upon him anytime before vanishing. Left alone, Aqua sat on the couch with Tiara in his arms, his expression sullen. Recognizing his lingering anger, she quickly apologized. Aqua nibbled her ear and whispered an admission of intense jealousy over her, calling the Fairy King by his first name. Tiara asked if he desired the same informality. Deciding it was acceptable in private, she softly uttered Aqua's name, bringing a bright smile to his face as he embraced her tightly. Later, Tiara's bridal teacher praised her for completing 6 months of coursework in a single month. Aqua then invited her to observe his royal duties. Though hesitant due to her limited knowledge, Aqua reassured her the insight would be highly beneficial. Still, Tiara pushed herself, studying late into the evening. Driven by a deep desire to be useful, she couldn't help but feel slightly insecure watching 14-year-old Lady Isilla frequently assist Aqua with important office matters. On a baking day, the forest fairies gifted Tiara foraged ingredients. She presented a freshly baked, naturally sweet cake to Aqua and Isilla during office hours. The atmosphere grew awkward when a maid simultaneously brought a cake from Isilla's family chef, as Isilla was unaware of Tiara's baking. Fortunately, Tiara remained cheerfully unbothered, firmly believing more sweets was always a positive outcome. Aqua watched Tiara eat with delight, but Noah disrupted the peace by asking Aqua which cake he preferred. Before Aqua could formulate an answer, Keith suddenly appeared, declaring Tiara's cake far superior. Licking frosting from his thumb, he patted Tiara's head and promised to return. Visibly angered, Aqua firmly reminded Keith he despised anyone touching his fiancée. Keith merely smirked and vanished again. By evening, Noah noticed Aqua forcing himself to eat cake despite his known dislike for sweets. When asked why he hadn't just praised Tiara's baking earlier, Aqua explained the delicate diplomatic reality. Keeping Isilla happy was paramount. If her mood soured, the sea fairies would sense it and cause the oceans to rage. As long as she remained cheerful, the seas shared their bountiful resources, a dynamic Aqua privately considered a massive liability. That night, Tiara suddenly jolted awake as a terrifying realization struck her. She remembered a specific computer graphic from the game's sequel depicting a famously handsome scene, Prince Aqua emerging completely drenched from the water while on a date with the game's heroine, Isilla. Because this specific event marked a major progression in their romance, Tiara was deeply concerned. She reasoned that everything would be fine as long as Aqua avoided the ocean entirely. Her relief was short-lived. The very next day, Aqua informed her of his plans to inspect the ocean alongside Isilla to investigate a new coral species. Unable to hide her distress, Tiara's emotions clearly showed on her face. Aqua encouraged her to speak freely, but when she tried to dismiss her feelings as selfish, he refused to let her finish. Gently pressing her lower lip, he insisted he would not stop until she voiced her true desires. Finally yielding, Tiara pleaded with him not to go into the ocean. Without hesitation, Aqua agreed, offering to delegate the task to Elliot and affirming that Tiara was far more important to him. With Isilla perfectly fine with the change of plans, Aqua set off to retrieve Elliot, inviting Tiara to accompany him so they could enjoy the lovely rose garden along the way. During their walk, Isilla spotted some white roses she thought would perfectly match Tiara's hair. As she reached high to pick them, she accidentally stumbled backward. Aqua immediately rushed to catch her, lost his balance in the process, and fell directly into the water of a nearby fountain. As the two girls stared at him, completely drenched, Tiara realized he was embodying the exact handsome moment she had feared. Panic set in as she realized that the pivotal romantic event, originally slated for the ocean, was happening right there in the garden. Terrified that the game's narrative power was absolute and impossible for her to change, she watched as Isilla wiped Aqua's face before turning and running away in despair. Hiding safely behind a closed door, Tiara berated herself for fleeing after promising she would not run away anymore. Overwhelmed by anxiety, she questioned whether her prince's heart was still truly leaning toward her. Suddenly, Keith appeared beside her, softly chuckling as he wiped her tears away. He gently asked if Aqua was the one who had made her cry. Although she attempted to deny it, Keith easily perceived the ache in her heart. He offered her an open invitation to come to him whenever she was suffering. Despite her vocal objections, Keith pulled her into his embrace, casually reminding her that fairies were free beings, right before teleporting them both far away. Aqua rushed into Tiara's room shortly after, only to find no trace of her, save for a few scattered petals left behind by the Fairy King. Meanwhile, the forest fairies warmly welcomed their king and Tiara back to his secluded domain. Pulling herself away, Tiara demanded to know the meaning behind his actions. In response, the king snapped his fingers, summoning a soft bed of sunflowers, and forcefully pushed her down to rest. When Tiara stubbornly insisted that Keith return her to her own room, he simply placed his palm on her head and used his magic to knock her unconscious, quietly noting his surprise at how easily she fell asleep. As he watched over her, Keith reflected on the situation. While he and the forest fairies adored Tiara, he considered the sea fairies who fiercely loved Isilla to be an immense nuisance. He knew firsthand how intensely attached they could become. Centuries ago, when another girl beloved by them had found herself in trouble, the ocean had stained red, the fish had vanished, and the coral had withered away. At the castle, the knights were frantically searching for the missing Tiara. A desperate Aqua descended into the basement to consult the royal family's forbidden texts, hoping to uncover the location of the Fairy King's hidden domain. Within the ancient pages, he discovered a cryptic clue. The path to the Forest Fairy King's throne began right there in the castle, specifically within the Queen's chamber. His focus was abruptly broken when Keith materialized directly behind him. The Fairy King casually pointed out the prince's palpable desperation, mockingly attributing it to his abducted consort. Keith admitted he hadn't originally planned to kidnap Tiara, but had simply changed his mind. When Aqua angrily demanded he stop joking, the Fairy King clarified he was entirely serious. He fully intended to keep Tiara. Enraged, Aqua lunged at him, but Keith effortlessly vanished into thin air, leaving the prince consumed by frustration while Tiara continued to rest in the fairy realm. The path to the Fairy King had been spoken of only among the royal family of Marin Forest for generations. It served as a beacon of hope left by one beloved by the king for their descendants. This hidden path became Prince Aqua's destination in his desperate search for his fiancée, Tiara. As Aqua cast magic over the forest portrait, his loyal attendant, Elliot, watched closely. Elliot reflected on how his lord was usually calm and collected, but all composure vanished regarding his beloved Tiara Rose. Determined to support his lord, Elliot joined Aqua on the quest to bring Tiara back. The two men wandered down a dark path. Elliot attempted to inspect the area using magic, but it proved ineffective. Aqua understood that if magic was too difficult for someone of Elliot's caliber, it would be impossible for anyone else. Suddenly, Aqua stepped on a root, causing more to slither from above. He barely jumped back before they violently pierced the ground. The thorns made it clear the Fairy King didn't want them near him. The memory of King Keith declaring he was taking Tiara deeply irritated Aqua. Despite the dangers, he pressed on faster, driven by a desire to bring Tiara back. The trees continuously attempted to block their way, and roots burrowed out to attack, but Aqua and Elliot warded off every assault with their swords. When briar bulbs shot toward them, Aqua cut them down, channeling his magic to unleash a blast that cleared the path forward. Meanwhile, Princess Tiara awoke. Fairies floated above her, offering fruit to play. Remembering she had been taken against her will, but learning the Fairy King was away, she indulged in a strawberry. The thrilled fairies brought an abundance of fruits. Unable to turn down their goodwill, Tiara ate until stuffed. The fairies cheered, delighted she enjoyed their offerings. Although the atmosphere was pleasant, Tiara desperately wanted to return home. The fairies agreed to show her the way, but instead mischievously brought her to a special kitchen Keith had built for her. The kitchen was stocked with flowers and nuts for seasoning. Tiara sampled the ingredients, noting the pink flowers tasted like sugar, the blue like salt, the red carried a spicy kick, and the yellow tasted like pepper. The fairies eagerly requested she bake sweets. Even though Tiara was anxious to get back to Aqua, they begged with sad faces, and she realized she couldn't leave until she baked something. While mixing her batter, the fairies added the pink flowers. Although not as sweet as sugar, Tiara assumed they would work fine. She silently wished for traditional seasonings but decided against demanding them from her kidnapper, quickly finishing a batch of cute cupcakes. The fairies enjoyed the treats and fulfilled their promise to lead Tiara out. However, opening the door, she stepped into a lonely throne room. Tiara felt a profound urgency to return home, knowing Aqua must be worried sick. Because Aqua saw Keith take her, she was desperate to prevent misunderstandings. When the fairies innocently asked who Aqua was, Tiara explained he was her fiancé and the man she loved deeply. Even though Aqua made his love abundantly clear, Tiara still felt the compelling force of the Otome game's narrative was terrifying to contend with. Suddenly, Tiara gasped, caught off guard as Keith grabbed her hands from behind. Remarking that he truly didn't understand humans, he effortlessly swept her into a Princess Carrie. As he sat on his throne with her in his arms, Tiara demanded he stop. When asked why she was determined to go home, she explained she didn't want to trouble Prince Aqua or be a burden. Keith believed that being loved by the forest fairies meant she contributed plenty to the kingdom. Dismissing her concerns, he stated humans were merely burdens and assured her she wouldn't have to wait for anyone else because he was already there for her. At that moment, Aqua burst through the doors, discovering Tiara in Keith's arms. Drawing his blade, Aqua demanded her release, declaring he would take her back by force if necessary. Tiara pleaded with him not to escalate the situation, but Aqua was resolute. He refused to let anyone lay hands on his fiancée. Keith scoffed, arrogantly reminding the prince he had access to any woman he desired. Aqua angrily retorted that Tiara was the only one he needed. Keith dismissed Aqua's devotion as laughable, pointing out Tiara had felt uneasy this entire time and blaming her insecurity on Aqua. When Tiara begged Keith to stop provoking him, he dismissively told her a woman shouldn't interfere in a battle between men. Moving with supernatural speed, Keith flashed before Aqua, questioning if a mere human could defeat the Fairy King. Refusing to back down, Aqua unleashed a continuous flurry of slashes. Keith dodged with zero effort, though he privately acknowledged Aqua's skills weren't half bad. Drawing on his conviction to protect his kingdom, Aqua lunged, only to watch in disbelief as Keith stopped his heavy blade with a simple decorative fan. Declaring it his turn, Keith waved the fan and fired a destructive gale. The wind's sheer force shattered the wall behind them, exposing the distant sea. Aqua realized the palace sat on the edge of a sheer cliff, the tallest mountain in the land. Undeterred, Aqua illuminated his blade with water magic, genuinely impressing Keith. Aqua fired 2 water blasts, but the Fairy King easily deflected them. Calling upon the wind, Aqua propelled himself upward for a devastating falling slash. Keith blocked it effortlessly and retaliated with a blast that sent Aqua flying, dripping with blood. Tiara let out a shrieking gasp. As Aqua charged again and Keith prepared a counterattack, Tiara suddenly threw herself between them. Keith instantly redirected his magic to avoid a direct hit, but the backlash of the colliding forces struck her anyway, launching Tiara straight out of the gaping hole in the wall. Without hesitation, Aqua dove into the open air, using wind magic to catch her in a tight embrace. As they plummeted, they shared a purely romantic moment. Reunited, Aqua tearfully apologized, admitting his lack of strength had caused her uneasiness. Tiara vehemently denied this, insisting she was wrong to be jealous of Lady Isilla, especially since Aqua always made time for her. Aqua, completely unaware of her jealousy, kissed her head, leaving Tiara in disbelief that he was fawning over her while falling to their deaths. He apologized for his imprudence, but confessed her jealousy made him incredibly happy. They shared a deep kiss, and he told her to brace for impact. Oddly, Tiara felt no fear. She had absolute faith Aqua would keep her safe. In desperation, Aqua called to the Sky Fairies. The Sky King, silently noting Aqua's recklessness, recognized he had no choice and granted his blessing. Instantly, Aqua and Tiara floated upright in midair. Granted magical wings, the couple hovered, watching the breathtaking sunset over the kingdom. Overwhelmed by the beauty and knowing how hard Aqua fought to protect their home, Tiara wept with joy. She admitted worrying over trivial things and vowed to work harder by his side. With all her heart, she kissed him. Following the ordeal, the men endured an hour-long lecture from Tiara, who forbade them from such recklessness again. Both apologized. Aqua promised to spend more time with Tiara, while Keith stubbornly countered he would visit more frequently. Tiara sighed, feeling neither had learned the lesson. Tiara loudly demanded they stop bickering, wondering if the stubborn men could ever get along. The argument was interrupted when fairies arrived bearing a single cupcake. Tiara realized her answer, sharing sweets might forge a truce. She broke the cupcake perfectly in half, dropping both men's jaws. Explaining she baked it earlier, she expressed her desire for them to work together and offered each a piece. They simultaneously complained half wasn't enough. Aqua plucked a decorative flower from his half and offered it to Tiara as a symbolic gesture of her promise to support him. She ate it happily. Not to be outdone, Keith did the same. The flowers tasted doubly sweet. As the rivals finally enjoyed their halves, Tiara felt pleasantly surprised at their transition from a life-or-death battle to a peaceful snack. Amused, she concluded the two kings had much in common. A fairy fluttered by, joking that Tiara was acting like a king herself. The comment made Tiara nervous, realizing she functionally had two powerful kings at her service. Though she felt it was no laughing matter, Aqua and Keith burst into joyous laughter. Tiara was delighted to finally return home to her parents after a whole year, having completed her bridal training. Their reunion was quickly interrupted by a maid announcing unexpected visitors, Akari and Heart Knights. Still angry over the previous year's events, Tiara's father demanded they be sent away. However, Tiara wished to speak with Akari to gather information about the sequel's events. Her father reluctantly yielded on the condition that Prince Aquasteed accompany her. Tiara felt apologetic, but Aquasteed harbored no objections, genuinely enjoying her assertiveness. Akari greeted them boisterously, acting as though nothing had happened. She rambled enthusiastically about her hard work with Heart Knights, noting that moving past the game's original ending felt like playing an entirely new game. Congratulating the couple, her eyes sparkled with pride that Tiara had successfully overcome the sequel's heroine. Akari then inquired if Tiara had faced any troubles. When Tiara admitted the sea fairies didn't favor her, Akari presented them with protective charm, earrings imbued with a holy prayer, a pink one matching Tiara's hair, and a dark blue one for Aquasteed. Akari explained her belief that one should wear their loved one's color, revealing she wore yellow for Heart Knights because she found him increasingly endearing. Aquasteed politely tolerated the pleasantries but expressed surprise at Tiara's friendliness toward Akari, considering the past attacks. Akari, however, viewed them as partners united in taking down the sequel's heroine, a remark that left Tiara chuckling and Heart Knights oblivious. Privately, Aquasteed was glad Tiara was in good spirits, but he longed to eventually hear her full truth. Recognizing she held a secret, he playfully warned her that keeping him in the dark would invite consequences. Observing their flirtation, Akari casually requested they save their affection for when she wasn't present, ultimately wishing them happiness before leaving. The following day, while seeing her parents off, Tiara expressed her profound happiness. She reflected that her strict upbringing and the vast experiences provided by her mother had given her strength. Her parents were overjoyed, sharing a heartfelt embrace before their next meeting at the wedding in Marine Forest. The night before the wedding, Tiara sat fixated on her hand, anticipating her wedding ring. Her maid, Feline, shed tears of joy until a knock signaled an unexpected guest, Isilla. Sitting together over tea, Isilla apologized for the abrupt visit and offered her congratulations. She straightforwardly addressed Tiara's assumption that she harbored feelings for Aquasteed, explaining she trusted her father to find her a suitable husband and confessed she didn't understand the concept of love. This revelation made Tiara wonder if her own existence had disrupted Isilla's destiny to romance Aquasteed as a conquerable route. Tiara felt a strong urge to console her, but Akari abruptly intervened. Arriving unexpectedly, Akari greeted Isilla with intense scrutiny, noting she perfectly resembled her in-game counterpart. Pulling Tiara aside, Akari explained she wanted to see the miserable girl designated as the sequel's heroine. Claiming her protective behavior was justified because she and Tiara were friends, Akari harshly warned Isilla against getting too close to Aquasteed. Isilla gasped and immediately apologized for her perceived lack of consideration. Tiara reassured Isilla and scolded Akari for her harsh words. Shortly after, Feline announced Aquasteed's imminent arrival, prompting Isilla to bid a sorrowful farewell. As Isilla departed, Tiara noticed she wore a dark blue ribbon. Tiara questioned Akari's motives, but Akari vaguely claimed she only wanted to witness how the sequel ended before suddenly vanishing. As guests gathered for the highly anticipated wedding, Akari's warning weighed heavily on Isilla's mind. She had never intended to get close to Aquasteed, viewing him as brilliant but entirely out of reach. Yet, she now reacted uncontrollably to the thought of him. Meanwhile, Tiara nervously asked Feline if her dress looked strange, but Feline firmly reassured her. As Tiara prepared to walk down the aisle, thoughts of Isilla and Akari's cryptic comments plagued her mind, leaving her wondering if an incident would occur during the ceremony. The traditional tones of the organ filled the hall as Tiara entered, moving past her tearful father. She was overcome with joy seeing Aquasteed in his white suit, proudly wearing the pink earring. In the audience, Isilla was tormented by a painful ache in her heart. Struggling to understand her emotions, she questioned if her deep respect for Aquasteed was actually love, a realization that left her horrified. Overwhelmed, Isilla jolted upward, but Akari swiftly intercepted her, pointing out that Isilla truly did love Aquasteed despite her denials, forcing her to finally confront the agonizing pain in her chest. Akari had anticipated this exact scenario. In the sequel game, a specific event allowed the heroine to intervene and halt her love interest's marriage to someone else, unlocked solely by wearing a ribbon in the love interest's signature color to the ceremony. While Akari admitted a personal fondness for the thrilling romance of wedding intervention events, she firmly resolved that such fantasies needed to remain fictional, refusing to let anyone ruin her friend's special day. Keith unexpectedly appeared out of nowhere, noting the sheer coincidence of the situation and voicing his agreement with Akari. Startled by his sudden arrival, Akari and Isilla listened as he sternly warned Isilla that any attempt to disrupt the wedding would not be tolerated. Isilla solemnly promised to behave, though watching the couple at the altar only intensified her heartache as she accepted she could never stand by Aquastide's side. Up at the altar, Tiara heard the sound of weeping and glanced back, confirming her fears. Isilla truly was in love with Aquastide. In the background, Akari enthusiastically signaled to Tiara in a comical display, acting as though she had successfully completed a mission. Aquastide also noticed Isilla's tears, manifesting Tiara's greatest fear. Plagued by anxiety over whether the wedding would actually proceed, Tiara had constantly worried about what she would do if Aquastide chose Isilla at the final moment. Even if she was technically obstructing their intended true love, Tiara refused to lose him. She called out to Aquastide, drawing his attention to the tears in her own eyes. Pressing herself against his chest, she silently vowed that losing was not an option, as her love for him surpassed all else and she desired to be with him forever. Sensing her renewed unease, Aquastide suddenly scooped her up in his arms and gently carried her over to face Isilla. Kneeling before the weeping girl, he sincerely thanked her for attending their wedding. As Isilla offered her tearful congratulations, Tiara squeezed Aquastide tightly. He then firmly declared to Isilla that Tiara was the most precious person to him. Following his gentle apology, Isilla reassured him not to worry. She confessed that while she had admired him deeply, she was moving past those feelings, wishing him greater happiness than anyone else in the world and thanking him for teaching her the true feeling of love. As Aquastide carried Tiara back to the altar, he affectionately teased that she looked so cute when she cried that he simply wanted to eat her up, finally bringing a smile to her face. Standing before the priest, he presented Tiara with a wedding ring infused with his magic. Slipping it onto her finger, he promised to hold on to her forever. She returned the vow, placing a tender kiss on his head. Aquastide kissed her in return, silently swearing to treasure her for the rest of his life. Suddenly, the hall was illuminated by a radiant green glow, resembling a shower of falling stars. Keith loudly cheered for the future king and queen, bestowing his blessing for their health, happiness, and the continued peace of the kingdom. The entire congregation watched in absolute amazement as the couple received the Forest Fairy King's divine blessing. The newly married couple exited the hall, greeted by the thunderous cheers of a waiting crowd. Watching them, Keith felt a pang of jealousy, recalling how lovely Tiara looked when she commanded the flowers and admitting his strong desire for her. Akari quickly scolded him, warning that such talk would only incite Aquastide's anger. Undeterred, Keith snapped his fingers, causing the surrounding flower petals to glow with a soft pink light. Overwhelmed by the beauty and blessings of the moment, Tiara began to cry once more, her tears of pure joy flowing freely. With the events of the game definitively concluded, Tiara realized she could finally live her reality in peace, free from the dictating mercy of a pre-written narrative. The narrative then shifted, revealing that deep at the bottom of the ocean, another princess lurked, declaring that love was entirely worthless. Thank you for watching this week's anime recap. If you liked the video, please help this channel by leaving a like and subscribe to help us reach our goal of 30K subscribers.